get out there and be the best lady you can be.
Best lady I can be.
That's the spirit. A little.
Yeah. Let's just say that the message is not subtle with this one.
Soon all the best women will be men. Cheating, lowlife men. Like you.
Lady Ballers is a political comedy produced by The Daily Wire. And unlike many who have given their thoughts on the trailer, I have watched the film in its entirety, and I can tell you that while the trailer is heavy-handed and one-dimensional on the controversial topic of transgender athletes, it's equally so on all other topics. Picture the most extreme views on the left, and that's what you're going to get throughout. Which, of course, is fine since it's satire, and to a large extent, they do a pretty decent job of taking swings. To give you an example, 10 minutes in, the daughter of the lead protagonist reveals to her father that she's being taught Marxist ideology at school.
Our history teacher led us in a moment of silence for all the workers exploited by the capitalistic system.
And she then calls her father a transphobe and a boomer when he calls into question her seeing a penis in the girl's toilet.
Why do you keep misgendering Mary Margaret?
Misgendering? What are you talking about?
It's very transphobic of you.
How do you know the word transphobic?
I'm 8 years old.
Exactly, you're 8 years old.
Okay, boomer.
To which the father says that he's gonna get her homeschooled.
Private schools reinforce white patriarchal privilege.
And that is just a minute of content. Throughout, the jokes are straightforward. The writers have found the most absurd leftist positions online and have ran with them as if they're standard implemented policy. So basically, it's the Daily Wire, but since it's comedy, it gets away with the absurd portrayals.
It's racism, Rob. You can't tell a bunch of teenage boys not to steal.
And yes, many of their jokes are only going to land if you're essentially entrenched in politics. For instance, if you're not aware of the issues in California, you probably won't get the joke you've just heard. The film also expresses just about every right-wing narrative, including that Judaism and Christianity are being repressed.
Yes, you can, Gary. It's one of the most important things you should be teaching them. It's literally in the Bible.
Which you also can't teach them.
We also get the narrative that divorce is evil.
Of course your divorce is affecting your daughter. 70% of all people in prison come from broken families. She's twice as likely to do drugs, twice as likely to drop out of school, 4 times as likely to have trouble fitting in, 3 times as likely to end up in therapy, twice as likely to commit suicide, 50% more likely to have health problems.
Because, you know, the only way to fix these issues is to uphold traditional marriage values. And to give just one more example of their heavy-handed humour, they make out that the pro-abortion side treats abortions as if it's mere self-centred inconvenience.
Put a baby in me.
What?
No, you're right. The last thing I need is another abortion this year.
Yeah. You see what I mean? They're not really hiding the message. They're giving the most heavy-handed woke content a run for its money, which is kind of the point, right? And so we do have to bear that in mind. This film is, at least in part, a big you to Hollywood. It's political satire, and thus how much you enjoy it is going to come down to how frustrated you are with politics in modern cinema. This is why, at least as far as I can make out, so many people have given it 10 out of 10, because to be straight, it just ain't funny enough for that. It's at best a budget dodgeball.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. What?
Anyhow, now that we've set the stage, let's dive into the heart of Lady Ballers, the storyline. The film tells the story of a once successful high school basketball coach named Rob, who finds himself down on his luck and desperate to reclaim his past glory. While looking for a job, he bumps into Alex at a drag diner, who is one of the players Rob once coached. And after catching up over a beer, they decide to test Alex's sprint, which inspires them to enter a competition. The only issue is that the men's spots are full, and when Rob kicks up a fuss, the registrar, covered in LGBT attire, says that she's not going to be talked down to by a white man, and so electrocutes him.
I will tase a white man.
Alex then turns up, and the registrar mistakes him as a trans woman, profusely apologises, waives the entry fee, enters Alex into the women's competition, and pleads for them not to take this to social media because she has a queer dog.
Oh my crap, you're a trans woman. Oh my crap, I tased an ally.
Alex proceeds to smash the competition because in this film, males are better than females even if they're not in impeccable shape and have never been elite. Enjoying the taste of glory, Rob and Alex decide to gather the old team back so that they can enter the Women's Basketball League, and as a result, these out-of-shape men destroy the females who are in their prime.
Holy crap, they are gonna be this easy!
But that's not all. These same men enter female wrestling, shot put, sprinting, and you name it. And yes, these men dominate every spot they enter, and no, the film disregards the rules, such as weight categorization in wrestling, and of course, hormones for entering women's sport. That's right, hormones and transitioning as a whole are not a thing in this film. You see, Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring originally considered making a factual documentary instead of a fictional film, but then they hit a pretty serious stumbling block.
Now, to be fair, I think I'd actually suggested to the Crane Boys that they do this as a doc.
Yes.
I originally went to them and I said, you guys should go try out for a bunch of ladies' leagues. And that became not possible because, as it turns out, most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men. And they weren't willing to go the full distance in terms of what it would require in order to, the actual hormone treatments and everything to play in some of the ladies' leagues. But in any case, it turned into this.
Indeed. Because males can't simply turn up and compete in female sports, the Daily Wire chose to make a fictional film in which they can. Now sure, it's still controversial and debated as to whether trans women should ever be able to compete in women's sports, and we'll get to this later, but the super controversial view that serves as the very premise of the film, that trans women, or in the film's case, any man, can simply walk into a women's competition, is false.
Most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men.
And that's a pretty serious problem, right? But it's satire, so I guess it gets a free pass. Well, I don't think so, but more on this later. Getting back to the story, despite a lengthy 2-hour runtime, substantial character and plot development are slow, with there only being a few instances of some of the team questioning their actions. The final match is against a team that, instead of bringing on their female players, brings on a professional male team. Rob gives the Lady Ballers a pep talk, but they get annihilated by the professional team, and it's only at the halfway point, when they have essentially lost, that the coach and the team decide to throw the game by substituting themselves with Rob's daughter's team. The opposition lets the children score points, but it's not enough, and so the Lady Ballers are knocked out. In the final scene, Rob wins his wife back, because she falls in love with him again for being a real man, and the world lives happily ever after. So, there's the synopsis. Now let's dive a little deeper into the characters. First off, we have the main protagonist, Coach Rob Gibson, who is played by Jeremy Boring, the co-founder and co-CEO of the Daily Wire. In addition to being the main star, Jeremy directed and co-wrote the film, which makes his many sexual scenes with the antagonist, who's half Jeremy's age, all the more cringe.
Put a baby in me.
Honestly, it gives me Neil Breen vibes. Alright, maybe that's a little unfair, but it is close to Neil Breen. It's close. Despite the ego trip, Jeremy's expressions are pretty damn good, and he plays the role well. He's genuinely a better actor than I was expecting. Next up, we have Gwen Wild, played by the TikTok star Billy Ray Brandt, who serves as the antagonist of the film. But I say antagonist lightly, as her motives and character are so poorly written, and she's used as an engine to express the message in contradictory ways. It's really quite jarring. She's a very oddly written character.
70% of all people in prison come from broken families.
Then there's Matt Walsh's character, Chris Dilby, who, in stark contrast to his real-life persona, plays a hippy-dippy liberal. He's a fun character, for the most part. We then have Coach Rob's daughter, Winnie, played by Rosie Harper, who has been groomed by her school and society to become pro-communist, pro-all things transgender, anti-white, you name it. And she ends up wanting to be a boy because, get this, boys are better than girls at everything.
I want to be a boy. Boys are better at everything.
But don't worry. Rob tells her that women are better at civilizing men and having babies.
They're better at communicating and building community, and they civilize men. Plus, Mommy brought you into the world. That's a superpower no man will ever have, yeah?
Did you get that, ladies? The lesson isn't something along the lines of men having advantages over women in many sports, and that's why we need a distinction. No, the message is that you suck at sports, it's true, but you're really good at keeping the community together and making babies. Throughout the film, there are two reporters, Drake and Stacey, played by Michael Knowles and Brett Cooper, who over the runtime become more and more involved in identity politics. And you know what? Despite my great dislike for Knowles, I found his role to be among the most funny. He starts off by pointing out that the men who are pretending to be women for personal gain, because yes, in this film, we only see men merely pretending to be women for personal gain, have an advantage because of their size and strength.
I think Stacey is referring to the obvious fact that Alex is a
what?
Well, I mean, as brave and beautiful as he is.
She is brave and beautiful.
Of course.
And as a consequence, the network has him undergo sensitivity training and he becomes a meme.
During my 2 weeks of sensitivity training, I discovered that I am not only a raging scoliosexual, but also 1/2048 pure Dakota Indian.
Not only does he have a spectacular and hilarious mustache, but he's also used to subtly dig at Elizabeth Warren. This is another one of those inside jokes that I mentioned earlier. But then again, at least this one doesn't need context to still be a joke. And then we have the Lady Baller players, but honestly, there's not much to say other than that they're essentially a knockoff dodgeball crew. They're one-dimensional, and while many of the jokes written for them are meh, some of them certainly crack a smile. They did, at least for me. Tyler Fisher, playing Felix, who later becomes Sheelix, yep, top-notch comedy there, is particularly forceful and indeed hilarious in his performance, which kind of makes sense given that he's one of the only members of the cast who's actually an actor.
I was just invited to the White House to give a talk on women's rights.
You earned that.
You own it. Slay, girl.
You go, girl.
Moving on to cameos, a short but entertaining one comes from Ben Shapiro, the other co-founder of the Daily Wire, who steps in as a referee.
Guys, I'm getting paid like $50 to be here. I don't care.
Then we have Ted Cruz. Yes, Ted Cruz, which serves, I guess, as little more than a nod to the political leanings of the film.
Excuse me, are these seats open?
Never mind.
We also have Andrew Klavan, who comments on the size of the opposition.
That's the biggest dick I've ever seen on a lady.
Bravo, bravo, Andrew. Very original. Very original. I've never heard that one before. And then last and least, we get Candace Owens, who sat in Chris's car, who is revealed to be undercover.
What are you talking about? I don't understand how anything you did helped to make this situation better.
So, now that we've got to grip with the characters, the film's theme and approach is, I trust, clear. On the one hand, Lady Ballers is a reaction to the most absurd leftist politics in other films. You know the ones, where the characters will tell you that they're homosexual and hate capitalism when doing so is utterly incongruent with the storyline. And on this front, I think Lady Ballers does a great job, and good on them. Some of these super left-leaning writers are in dire need of a slap in the face, and if Lady Ballers serves as such, then good. Wake up, Hollywood. But on the other hand, Lady Ballers takes the controversial and complex topic of transgender people as a whole, not just trans athletics, and shows little to no accuracy, nuance, and most importantly, humanity. The key takeaway of the film is that trans people, and in particular trans women, are pretending to be women for self-gain. And that is, indeed, an awful message. It's akin to depicting, say, Christians as merely pretending to believe in God to keep control of the masses. It's not only problematic from an intellectual angle, it's deeply dehumanizing. And when we overlay this with the current landscape, in which commentators, which include, of course, all of the Daily Wire crew that feature in this film, are explicitly stating that trans people should not be allowed to exist in society, all comical scenes pale to the monstrous message that props them up.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology.
And the thing is, the film had every opportunity to achieve a small slice of humanity. Despite its heavy-handedness, it was actually in a position to convey a heartfelt message. At the end, Alex earnestly tells Rob that while he doesn't think that competing against females as a male is okay, he still thinks that he really is a woman.
But
You what, pal?
I am a woman. I mean, all those years playing basketball, I never really felt like myself. A decade in Hollywood trying to figure out who I really was, and then I started working at the dollhouse, and this is the real me, coach. This is who I am. Proud of myself for the first time.
And this, at least as far as I'm convinced, was a fantastic opportunity for the film to achieve something great. Alex showed signs of gender dysphoria throughout. We're even first introduced to him at a drag diner, which is very loosely correlated with the trans community. And so the show could have conveyed that yes, trans women do exist, and they are earnest in their experiences, but this doesn't mean that they have the right to compete in categories that are designed for cis women, or biological women, or whatever term you damn well want to use, because on this one, everyone just gets triggered. You know what I mean, right? But no. Upon hearing Alex's words, Rob tells Alex that he's confused and deluded.
You're confused, I get that. You're just a lost man in a lost world with shitty parents and a real shitty coach. We've all gone along with this lie instead of just hurting your feelings and telling you the truth.
And because Alex isn't convinced by that, Rob proceeds to give him a sharp sting in the privates.
How can you be so sure I'm not a woman?
Good talk.
Honestly, it's like making a film where all you've got to do to stop religious people from being religious is kick them in the head.
Good talk, Phil.
This, amazingly, convinces Alex that he's not actually trans, which sends a clear message that all trans women need is a swift kick in the dick to convince them that their lived experience is a lie. I mean, wow. What a message. But this isn't surprising though, is it? For this film is written and directed by the Daily Wire, who have explicitly stated on numerous occasions their disdain for trans people. The Daily Wire are religious fanatics, and this film's true message isn't about sports. The message isn't that sports are based on physiological apparatus, and therefore gender isn't the determining factor. No, the message is that transgender people, all of them, are deluded, and it's something we should not tolerate in society.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely.
It's an insidious message that's delivered through the vehicle of comedy on the one topic that most politically unengaged people will agree with them on. In this sense, it's genius, but it is nevertheless incredibly inhumane. And what makes this message all the worse is that it's predicated on a lie. The lie is that all that is needed to compete in women's sport is to say that you're a woman.
It turns out most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men.
Hence, to communicate the message, they, one, needed not to depict any real trans people in the film, as that way they didn't need to humanize them and address gender dysphoria and the distinction between sex and gender. And two, they had to produce a film because they couldn't produce a documentary, which is to say that their premise is false. The film, then, is effectively taking the piss out of something that isn't true. You can't just enter female sports as a male. You have to undergo hormone treatment that will dramatically change your physiology. Now sure, it doesn't mean that trans women should be able to compete in women's sports, but it does reveal that the fact it's a film at all is because it's founded on a falsehood. And notice the way the Daily Wire sees fit to solve the problem here. It's with violence. This can't be understated. When the pious can't win the hearts and minds, they turn to violence, and the message in this film is that violence works. It actually convinces Alex that he's not a woman.
Good talk, Phil.
As a final chapter, if you will, let's talk about optics and how we've got to the point where a comedy that is so dehumanizing is heralded as a victory. One of the biggest factors is undoubtedly the bigotry emanating from the likes of the directors of this film, with religion playing a significant role. Religion has been an obstacle to women's rights and gay rights, so it's no surprise that it also hinders trans rights. The Daily Wire are upfront with their views. They see trans people at best as deluded, and at worst as malicious people trying to bend rules in their favour. And as said earlier, I find this as absurd as making out that religious people are mentally ill. The Daily Wire isn't, and has never been, interested in earnestly discussing anything related to trans people. They explicitly say that they want trans people eradicated from public life, and they figured out that delivering their message through a comedy is their best bet. But I would argue that the biggest factor here is actually the left. Too often, people with left-leaning views obsess over identity politics and minorities, consequently failing to evaluate or even consider the ground beneath their feet. Stuck in their echo chambers, they do not anticipate, much less understand the optics of their activism, and this is why most people who are not engaged in politics find this film refreshing and even cathartic. The fact of the matter, at least as far as I see it, and bear in mind that I'm anything but an expert on this issue, is that gender is only relevant to sports when it's conflated with sex, which it has been and still is by many people. Yes, the vast majority of those in academia now separate sex from gender, but most people are not there yet. Likewise to many advancements, it's going to take several generations until this view goes to mainstream. That's just the way that it works. But here's the thing. If we separate sex from gender, then it becomes apparent that sports are not categorised based on gender, are they? Hence, all pro-trans people need to do here is say, hey, can we please update our language so that those competing can use their preferred pronouns? That's a small ask, and I think that, at least in time, most people will be agreeable to these changes. And then a discussion about hormones and categories can be discussed. And because we would have solved the main issue, which is about pronouns and identity, it would be obvious to anyone looking in that the discussion pivots on physiological differences and not transgenderism as a whole. But no. Instead, many pro-trans people are doing precisely what anti-trans people want them to do. In fact, they need them to do it, and that is alienate the masses by calling them transphobic for basing their view on sports at bedrock on physiological differences. And what does this achieve? What does calling people who want sports to be based on physiology transphobic do? Here's what. It legitimizes actual transphobes. When the general population see people relentlessly being labelled transphobic because they want to base sports on a loose concept of fairness, they're no longer going to take seriously legitimate accusations of transphobia, are they? If you cry wolf when wolf ain't there, the hunt ain't gonna turn up. So while I hold the bigotry of many responsible for the unfortunate degradation of trans rights, I also hold my own camp responsible. The left has seriously dropped the ball on this one, and I hope the success of this film serves as a wake-up call.
I don't understand how anything you did helped to make this situation better.
Don't you?
Well, I see you, Matt. I see you. I see how the Daily Wire made the situation better. Depicting trans people as losers merely pretending to be trans for personal gain, portraying trans athletics as if hormones are not a prerequisite, and sending the clear message that trans people just need a kick in the privates to break their delusion.
Good talk.
So, that's my review. Lady Ballers certainly has a few funny scenes, but its underlying message is violent and extremely dehumanizing. Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to everyone who supports the channel. I'm anticipating a copyright strike on this one, but I think it's worth the investment. If you too think it's worth the investment, then please consider chucking me and the team a couple of dollars per month. It really does make a difference. Thank you very much.